There are multiple ways to keep in touch with the Wolf Connection podcast. Through our Instagram handle, the Wolf Connection Pod. And for comments and questions, send us an email to podcast@wolfconnection.org with your comments, questions, and guest ideas for Stephen and myself. You may hear your question answered on an upcoming podcast. Thank you for your support, and howls to you all. Welcome to the Wolf Connection podcast. I'm your host, John Kalfa. Let's talk about some wolves. He is the author of several books, The Rise of Wolf 8, Reign of Wolf 21. His new book, The Redemption of Wolf 302, is out, and he has another book coming out soon in the fall, The Alpha Female Wolf, The Fierce Legacy of Yellowstone's 06. He is also probably the most famed wolf watcher of all time, Rick McIntyre. Rick, thanks for joining Stephen and I again. How are you doing in Silvergate?
Well, thanks, John and Stephen. Real good. I'll tell you a little secret. So I got up really early this morning, about 3:15 a.m., went out to be with the wolves. And then, as I do pretty much every day when I get back, I get a little bit extra sleep. But I set my alarm for this, so I woke up again. This is my second shift today, I guess, with you guys. So I pattern my life on the wolves in the sense that they do stuff for a while, they sleep for a while, run around for a while, sleep again, repeat several times a day. So I've kind of had to adopt that lifestyle too, or I'd be dead now from exhaustion.
No, but it's the amount of days straight that you've put in, the amount of hours that you've watched. I mean, you are the consummate wolf person that everyone needs to talk to and really get the sense of what's going on. And you teased just before we started that you had some new happenings in the park. So just give us an idea of what's going on, I guess, this morning or recently, of what's happening.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Well, the main park pack that I study is the Junction Butte pack. They formed in 2012. It was a group of sisters from Molly's pack and some brothers from the Blacktail pack. And this is now the 10th year of the pack. And there's a lot of drama going on, particularly among the female wolves. So a couple of years ago, the alpha female was a gray wolf, 907. She now, the oldest wolf in the park, as far as we know, at least the oldest collared wolf, she's 9 years old. As I said, she had been the alpha female for quite some time, and it was very competent in it, was doing a good job. However, there was a younger female, a black female. She's not collared, so we'll just call her black female, that was very ambitious to climb the hierarchy. So she, as far as we could see, made an alliance with another female. And that was 907's same age sister, 969. And those two sisters had been going at it for years in terms of who was going to be the boss of the operation. So it was a very, very clever plan for the younger female, and she may well be the younger sister of the two older ones. So to put it simply, she made an alliance with the former alpha female, 969, and then the two of them attacked 907 and dethroned her. So it was 2 against 1. I'm sure at that moment, then 969 assumed that once more she would be the top female, she would be in charge. But what do you think the little sister did?
Oh, I'm sure she went and took the throne from 969, I would imagine.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. Doesn't it sound like something out of Game of Thrones or Shakespeare or something like that? Or American politics. And so the black female has been the boss ever since. This year, we're in the denning season. And we assumed that all of the pregnant females, we didn't know how many, but we assumed that 907, the black female, 969 has died, by the way. We assumed that those two and a few others would have pups. So the black female commandeered the regular den at Slough Creek. We call that the natal den. And it took us a while to figure this out. But 907 did something very different this year. She denned to the south of the Park Road and south of the Lamar River. And because she's old, she's so old, many of the adults are her sons and daughters. And she has an easygoing personality. The other one is a little bit, let's say, authoritative and maybe crabby to some degree. So here's the issue. We find that most of the wolves in the pack are serving 907 and helping her with her pups, as opposed to the younger alpha female. And then we realized that there was a second litter of pups in the southern den. That's with another female, 1276. And then it turned out that there was a fourth litter that was up at the natal den. So 4 litters, 4 mothers, and it was getting very complicated. And then it got more complicated. So the young mother, one by one, carried her pups to the southern den to join 907. She grabbed them by the rear end, and it took her about 40 minutes to make it all the way across. So now it appears that we have 3 litters to the south, only 1 to the north, and nearly all the adult wolves, except for the alpha male and the alpha female, are to the south, helping 907 with her pups, and then all of them working together to support the 3 litters. So that's where we are right now. It's kind of complicated.
In all your years of observing wolves, and especially these wolves, how unusual is this type of scenario?
We've never seen anything like this before. We had a pack, and ironically, it denned at Slough Creek years ago, the Slough Creek pack, and they had 4 litters as well, but they were all literally in the same den. And to make this more interesting, some of us have been talking about, well, what if black female, the current alpha, goes south herself and tries to join the other wolves? And I think there's a decent possibility that when she gets there, she's not going to be welcomed by the other wolves because they're used to working together. She's kind of a disruptive force. And so if she shows up, it may well be that the end result is she's going to be dethroned herself. And the old girl, 907, will be back in position. She'll be the once and former alpha female. I joke with the visitors here, especially if I'm talking to kids or college students, when I talk about how wolves have a matriarchal society and how it's actually the alpha female that is the true leader of the pack, not the alpha male. And I kid a little bit saying, asking kids, do you know what the male wolves do when the females are squabbling and fighting over who's going to be the boss? And they look at me and they're not sure what the answer is. And the answer is the males stay out of it when the females are fighting. So I think that's a pretty good indication of the intelligence of males. Now, you two guys look pretty smart to me, so I can imagine that you'd be smart enough to stay out of it.
Yeah, that's a pretty good idea, is to stay away while everything gets sorted out. How many pups were you able to count from the entire denning season from the Junction Buttes between the three litters?
Actually, we think 4 litters.
Oh, 4 litters. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, it's surprisingly hard because we watch the dens from about a mile away. There's a lot of sagebrush, so it hinders our view a little bit. But we have gotten a count of 15 pups at the southern den, and today there was a count of 18 pups at the northern den. There might be a few more, but a minimum of 18 right now.
Wow. So I guess this leads into my next batch of questions here, is that obviously this has been a different winter for the Wolves of Yellowstone, fall, winter, with the hunts that were going on and the wolves that were taken that crossed the borders. So in your viewing, in all the wolves that you've been watching over the past few months, What are some of the impacts that you've seen, not only on the Junction Butte, but on the wolf packs in general in Yellowstone?
Yes, thanks for bringing that up. For your listeners, I think I need to go back a little bit in time and review some history because oftentimes people don't fully understand why it's legal to shoot what would be considered Yellowstone wolves. We had our reintroduction in 1995. At that time, wolves were on the endangered species list in the Northern Rockies region, meaning Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming. So the reintroduction, of course, was very successful. And over the 27 years since then, we've averaged about a population of about 100 wolves in Yellowstone. And then there are healthy populations in Wyoming and Idaho as well. The way the Endangered Species Act works is that if you do restore a species like the wolves as they're doing well, then there can be consideration of taking them off of the endangered species list. Normally, that's a symbol of great success, especially of the reintroduction. So that is what happened. They were taken off of the regional endangered species list. And the consequences of that were that the management of wolves switched from outside the national park, from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to the 3 states and to their respective wildlife management, fish and wildlife management agencies. So to get to specifics, if we go back a couple of years ago in Montana, along the northern border of Yellowstone, they have 2 hunting zones, 316 and 313. And during those recent years, they had a limit of just 1 wolf that could be shot in each zone. And we thought those were very reasonable regulations. We had fought for that for many years and got that. Fortunately, last year, the game commissioners in Montana radically changed the management, and they switched it from just 1 in each zone to unlimited in both zones. You could kill as many as you wanted to, trap as many as you wanted to as well. By the way, if you are a Montana resident and you paid all the necessary fees to kill the maximum amount of wolves via hunting and via trapping, you could take a total of 20 wolves, and that would cost you $13.80 per wolf. That was the value that they placed on it. So that's what they feel the worth of wolves are. A different way of evaluating that is we now estimate that for tourism in the local region, the Yellowstone wolves are generating around $80 million. And since we have about 100 wolves, and you could, by that value, you could say that they're really worth about $800,000 each. So I'll let people just think about that for a moment. But to get back to the topic, in total, 24 of our roughly 100 wolves were taken during the hunt in the state. And specifically, in Junction Butte, they had the heaviest hit. So 8 of their pack members were shot and killed last year. I think about half of them were pups, who certainly were very naive when it came to traps. And the other half were yearlings who also were naive. So that's our recent history. I'm an optimistic person. We're about to have an upcoming new game commission meeting. A lot of wolf activists up in our area have been very involved in trying to turn this situation around. We feel that we've made some progress. And I forget if the meeting is in July or perhaps August, maybe July. We can find that out for sure for your listeners, and they can write in if they like. We're hopeful that this year we're going to go back to at least some limits. So the absolute worst scenario is unlimited. We're hoping we can go back to the limit of 1 each, but that's where we are now. There are many organizations that are working for this. The local one that I personally contribute to is called Wolves of the Rockies. If you go on their website, again, that's Wolves of the Rockies, they have really good information on what people can do. And I know for sure that they're very effective in lobbying in the sense of personally talking to these game commissioners. So there is some optimism that we may be able to turn this at least partway around this year.
Man, so for those of you that missed that, so yeah, to lose, Rick, in your estimation, because you've been around wolves for so long, to lose that many members, so 8 members feasibly of the Junction Butte pack were taken, and 25% of a population is a staggering number in and of itself. What ripple effect have you either seen or do you anticipate with some of that you're going to see down the line of the effect of that this is going to have in the future, just even in the coming months and possibly the next year?
Well, there's different ways we can talk about this. If we stay on the subject of the Junction Butte pack, as it was the younger wolves, it was not the worst case. So the alphas survived, 907, the old females survived, etc. However, one of our other packs, the 8 Mile pack, that was an opposite story. Their alpha female was one of the wolves that were shot and killed. I'm sure you understand that the true leader of the pack, as we've already discussed, is the alpha female, the mother wolf. She's the most experienced, she knows the most. And so it I guess, would be the equivalent of assassinating the president of the United States or the prime minister of Britain. It was the worst possible wolf to lose. And I personally, I don't know that pack as well, so I don't know who replaced her. But she makes all of the important decisions over the course of the year, where to den, where to move the pups when they're older, where to hunt. Hopefully the alpha female is savvy enough to try to keep her pack out of the hunting area. But it may well be that the new alpha female is very naive and not. So that pack in particular, we're very worried about. And to get back to the Junction Butte wolves, for listeners that may not be too familiar with Yellowstone or that pack, where I was today watching the natal den, that's only 5 miles from the northern park, where 907 is, and her pup's a little bit further to the south. Actually, they're only about 6 miles from the northern border. So that's a 1-hour walk for a wolf. This fall and on into the winter, when the current pups and all the other pack members, when they're traveling around as a unit, they're going to be going outside the park in that area. And that's why this is such a big issue for us.
Do we know how many wolves succumb to traps versus rifle hunters?
Myself am not knowledgeable about that. However, as I think about it, I think all of them were shot. One of the reasons for that is particularly the zone above the den area, that's 316. That's a fairly remote area that you'd have to take horses and ride into. It wouldn't be very practical to hike in there carrying a bunch of traps. So my impression is that trapping is not a major thing right there.
Mm-hmm. And how far outside of the boundary were they killed?
That information, but my guess would be perhaps within 5 miles. And for a wolf, they have no understanding of political borders. There's no fence there. And a related issue too, let me bring this up, is public safety. So if this morning, instead of watching wolves, if I had decided to take a hike, I used to be a fast hiker. I'm a little bit slower nowadays. It would take me maybe 2 hours, an hour and a half perhaps, if I rushed to get into that area. And there's really no signs for humans to know that you've left the safety of the national park. Now, so you could have a scenario where a family is hiking, they passed over the border, they didn't know there's a family of humans, not realizing it's the wolf hunting season. A lot of that area is forested, so it's possible that a person could see a wolf, shoot in that direction, maybe shoot several times. And if it's a forested area or an area of thick willows, they wouldn't be aware that there's a human family that's hiking just past where the wolves are. So that is a scenario. We have considered the possibility of asking the forest supervisor, the person in charge of that national forest, to institute a no hunting zone for 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 miles past the Yellowstone border for human safety reasons. So that's another possibility of what could happen here.
When you guys have this meeting in July, I believe you said for the wildlife commissioner, and correct me if I'm wrong on that. What are the topics? Yeah, what's on the agenda in terms of, is it just limits on hunts on what you can take for wolves, or are there other topics that you all are going to be bringing up and other things you're trying to implement for the safety of not only the wildlife in the park, but also, like you said, the human aspect of it as well?
This is the Montana Fish and Wildlife. I guess it's called the Game Commission. I believe there are 7 members right now. So that's a separate entity from the state agency, which is known as Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. So they have professional wildlife biologists managing, working for that agency, working with wolves, with bears, with elk, deer, all the mammal and fish species in Montana. So what's separate is the Game Commission. They set the rules and the regulations for hunting and trapping. And Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, the agency with the biologists, then some of their staff would be the game wardens that would be enforcing those regulations. So that's why the Game Commission meeting is the one for setting those regulations. In a perfect world, they would listen to the wolf biologists working for the state. And we feel those men and women are good folks. And if they were the ones setting the regulations, we'd probably feel pretty good about that. To be blunt, politics enter into this, as in so much of American life. So there's a lot of give and take on that. But I want to go back and emphasize the value of tourism here. I have a lot of friends in the local towns here, such as Gardner, Silvergate. Some people are up in Bozeman and then Livingston as well, others down in June. That's how they earn their living. They're professional wildlife guides. I hadn't realized it till this year that it's a very good profession to get into. First of all, it's a great job. Get up early in the morning, you meet your people, you take them out. Hey, look at the wolves there. There's the grizzly bears. There's the coyotes. There's the moose. That's a pretty good life. Instead of, guys that have to sit in a recording studio all day long with headphones on. No offense to you guys.
It's a lot better than that.
No, I'm sure you'd rather be out there watching wolves all day than talking to some bozo like me. But anyway, the real point is, not only is it a pretty pleasant job to have, I mean, one of the best you could have, but I'll just say the pay is really good, really good. So until this came along, wolves being back in the local region, let's say if a typical family around Yellowstone, and you have sons and daughters that are graduating from college, well, for a long time, no offense to people, but the best you could do would be Walmart, the convenience store, Arby's, and I've had those jobs. So I'm in no way being critical of them. But if you're starting out, a family, raising kids and stuff, pretty tough to make life ends meet. And as you may know, housing prices here, apartment prices here are just unbelievable. They're skyrocketing. I don't know how people just starting out after college or high school can survive. So the point here is our economic situation has radically changed in recent years. These are very good paying jobs and they're fun jobs. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? But the problem is that when it's publicized how many wolves have been killed, a lot of people will cancel their trips. They'll be very upset. And there's a controversy. Should you have a boycott of some of these states when they have these very high levels of legal wolf hunting and trapping? In some ways, a boycott can accomplish some good, but on the other hand, it really harms a lot of good people. So most of us tend to be against that. It can do more harm than good for the local people. So that's getting back to trying to be influential with the game commissioners.
So does that seem like the best way, I guess, going forward, the best shot at pushing for some kind of change is illustrating to local governments how detrimental this could be to their bottom line? Does that seem like the best way at this point?
Yes, and it specifically, as we've been saying, would be the game commissioner. So you can, there are ways you can testify via Zoom. You can write letters, emails. So as I said, the organization Wolves of the Rockies, if folks go to that website, they can get all the information.
Mm. And you talked about, we spoke with a couple of individuals that are part of that coalition, I believe, the Wild Livelihoods, that I think it's 150 businesses. There's a lot of them that are banding together to make their presence known, that this is their livelihood, and that, like you were stating, the negative impacts of people that see these things and then up and cancel a trip. I mean, we spoke with Casey Anderson and Kara, and she was saying, as a guide, they will call 2 days before and say, we've read about some of the negative impacts and we're just pulling all, and that's money that's not going now to her small business. And it's a lot of people don't, again, we talk about the ripple effect. People don't see what the hunting does to not just the wildlife, but also to the human aspect of, as you were saying, having a living and making a living in
That's
these
exactly
states.
Right. Yes. So I think maybe a way to wrap up the segment of what we're speaking about is we're just trying to get a fairer balance here. So it's many of us here, we understand that there is going to be some level of wolf hunting and trapping. And all we're asking for is, let's be reasonable about this. Let's have it at a low level. We can use our arguments in terms of out of respect for the wolf population and the value that they contribute ecologically to the park. For example, in the way that they preferentially will be killing elk, bison, and deer that have that chronic wasting disease. So they're a very valuable component of our ecosystem. We're saying, let's just be balanced on this. Let's go back to low levels, preferably one in each zone, if not one. And getting back to the Junction Butte wolves, we're hoping that this coming year, that if there are some losses, it's only going to be perhaps at most 1 or 2 rather than 8.
I got your book, the latest one, so Redemption of Wolf 302. I'm about a little shade over halfway, and it's wonderful. Again, I mean, your storytelling is bar none some of the best, probably the best that I've ever seen in terms of chronicling wild animals. So just give everybody a sense of why write the book on 302? What was the allure? Because you pick out, Rise of Wolf 8 is phenomenal, same as Reign of Wolf 21. What was the allure of 302 that made you decide to pen?
Well, I just happened to fall into this situation of being able to see these wolves all the time. And in the early years, when I was watching Wolf 8, and then a little bit after that, Wolf 21, I assumed that all adult male wolves had characters and behavior patterns like 8 and 21, who are the epitome of masculine responsibility. And then 302 came along and changed everything. He was a different wolf. So, and the irony was that he was the nephew of Wolf 21. So 21 was our greatest alpha male, and he was invincible in battle and never lost a fight as far as we know. But then again, never killed a defeated opponent. He was devoted to his longtime mate, 42. And so just the greatest wolf that we ever had. And but particularly a defining characteristic of him was his sense of responsibility to his family, to his mate, to his pups. So he would be willing to die to protect his family and his mate. And he just would work himself to death to feed them and vision them. And then his nephew came along and he was the exact opposite. This is a human thing to say, but it's true. And I don't know of a different way to put it. 302 is drop dead gorgeous. Just think of the most beautiful dog you've ever seen in your life and then multiply that by 10, and that was 302. And he just had a certain suaveness to it. Now, I'm sure you guys have a lot of suaveness in your life too, but he probably had a little bit more than you did. And the big problem initially was that 21 had a lot of single daughters at that time, the equivalent of, let's say, teenagers. And boy, they flocked to 302 and they just couldn't get enough of them. And very quickly, a lot of them had gotten pregnant. And then 302 abandoned them and just took off. So 21 that year, he had to raise his own pups. And then we later figured out through DNA, at least 5 302's pups, which would be 21's grandchildren. 21, during that era, he would catch his nephew, pin him, beat him up. 302 knew he couldn't fight back to someone like 21, so he would just kind of take it as best he could. But 21, as I think I said, had this principle that he never killed a defeated opponent, and so he would always let 21 go. It's kind of like Batman and Joker. Why doesn't Batman just kill the Joker and get it over with? But he just, lets him go or puts him in prison. So that was their relationship. And 302 eventually moved to Lamar Valley after the death of 21. For a very short period of time, he actually was the alpha male of 21's family, the Druid Peak Pack, but he was so bad at it that his younger relative, male 480, had to take over from him, so he was deposed. And actually, it was probably a good thing for 302 because then he continued to live a life of irresponsibility, and he could rely on the younger male to do all the heavy lifting. And then it got even more ridiculous for 302 because of all things, he developed a phobia. And it was the worst possible phobia for a big, strong, tough-looking male wolf. He became terrified of dead bull elk. So we began to notice that the family, the hunters, not 302, but the good hunters, would kill a bull elk. All of the wolves would come and start feeding on it, adults, yearlings, pups, etc. And then we would see 302 kind of standing off to the side, not eating, just watching the other wolves. And this is the absolute low point of his life. There was a little pup that was chowing down on the bull elk. He was full and he started to walk off. And 302 at that time was maybe 110, 120 pounds, ran over to this, I don't know, maybe a 10-pound pup and begged the pup for a feeding and actually got the pup to regurgitate some of the elk meat to 302. He was so afraid of the elk that he couldn't feed on it. So he conned the little pup into feeding him. And then another time, one of the mid-level adults went over to the mother wolf and gave her some meat. 20 ran over and stole it, which is a really bad thing if you're a member of a pack. My theory was that maybe what had happened, this is the only explanation I could come up with, was that he was previously feeding on a bull elk carcass, and up near the head, near the antlers, and maybe a wolf on the other side was tugging at a piece of meat. It broke free and the thing ricocheted and the antlers poked 302 in the face. And he was afraid that was going to happen to him. Either that or maybe he'd been watching too many episodes of that show, The Walking Dead, that has all those zombies elk in it. So he was afraid of zombie elks coming after him for revenge. Yeah. But to continue 302's story, I got to give him credit. That was the low point of his life. He was maybe 5-6 years old at that time. And he started to turn things around. So, maybe it was like a person, a man or a woman who finally realized that they really needed to do something. They needed to, whether a person's an alcoholic or, whatever you might want to say. And so he overcame that phobia. He became a lot more responsible. Then when he was an old wolf, left the Druid pack with 5 of his nephews and finally started his own pack. That was the Blacktail Plateau Pack. Yes, the Blacktail Pack. And I never would have expected this, but he actually became a pretty good alpha male. It was this just unbelievable turnaround in an individual's life. And to make it even more intriguing, that territory was where he grew up, where his father had been the alpha male many years ago. And he actually grew into an alpha male that was, in the end, comparable to his own father and even to his uncle, 21. And there's so many stories of 302 at that time that kind of combined his new sense of duty and responsibility, but also a little bit of the old 302, kind of a trickster type character, a joker type character. So I'll tell you this one story, then we can kind of move on a little bit. And so it was a hot day. 302 needed to take his afternoon nap, and he liked to take a nap in a marsh that, due to the thick willows, there was a lot of shade, so it was the coolest place. So I was watching him from about a mile away, and I noticed that one of the mother wolves in the family was in distress. She was trying to find her pups. They had gotten lost. She was howling. She was trying to find their scent trail, and she just couldn't find them. And she actually did a very clever thing. She stopped trying to find them, and she ran over to 302, woke him up. And however she did it, somehow she conveyed to 302 that he needed to get off his lazy butt, his lazy rear end, and fulfill his responsibilities as alpha male. So you could see him stretching and yawning, and he took off pretty much in a straight line. And I don't know how he did it, but he went right exactly to where the pups were, gathered them up, brought them back to that marsh. And here's where the old 302 came back. They were really hyper after this big adventure, and he really wanted to resume his nap. And he was smart enough to realize that they were going to pester him for play and whatever. So he walked them past his secret napping spot to where a yearling male was trying to nap, dumped them off on that guy, and then ran off to his secret place and resumed his nap. So here's one final thought on that. Why I think he was able to do that so efficiently. I said that he grew up there. So he knew all the secret places where the pups could hide from the adults and do whatever they wanted to do to get in trouble and stuff like that. So he used his knowledge of that area when he had grown up in it to solve that problem. So I have to admit, he was a smart guy. He knew how to figure things out. He was smarter than the average wolf.
What's the main lesson that you think yourself or other people have taken from 302? What's something that he embodies that you try to tell people when they ask you about 302?
Well, it's a really intriguing question that you just raised. I'm glad you did, because, for all of his failings, for all of his faults, and he had loads of them, somehow he turned his life totally around. And I have to be careful what I say next, because there's a very dramatic ending to his story. I don't want to spoil it for your listeners, but what I can say is when he was one of the oldest wolves that we've ever had, when he really slowed down, was having trouble keeping up with his pack, he did something on his last day of life that caused us to now think of 302 as one of our greatest heroes that we've ever had, on the same level as 8 and 21. And for him to achieve that after all of his failings, all of his faults, it's just unbelievable. And I think if there's a lesson in the story of a wild animal such as 302, his particular story, the lesson is that all of us, well, except for you two guys, you are perfect, but everyone else is has had some imperfections in our life. We've all messed up. We've all let people down. We've all made mistakes. We've all gone in wrong directions in our lives. And we've realized that we've screwed up. We've messed up. I think somehow, in some way, 302 kind of understood that about himself too. And if he could turn his life around, if he could become responsible and dependable and a hero, then I think you could say any of us can too. It doesn't matter what your past was. The important thing is the future. And his life story is exactly that story, that he messed up, he let other wolves down for years and years, and then had this unbelievable turnaround. So people love the stories of 8 and 21. There's something different about 302's story. It really strikes us because I think it is so relevant to human life and human endeavors. And
yeah, that's a profound lesson, if anything. So I'm glad that you're able to construct that and take that from his story and his life. So now I have to finish reading the book because he left me with a cliffhanger. So I have to finish reading. I want to move to, because you have another book that's coming in the fall, and you're speaking of 06. And so we've 06, at least from, I think if you're a general wolf lover, she is the one that people associate with, they know of as one of the most famous wolves. What was your process, or what was the inclination that you had for yourself to say, I'm going to write about this legendary character? And what are you looking to bring to that story that may be different from some of the others that have been told?
well, it just happened that the main character in the first 3 books are male wolves, 8, 21, and 302. So it was certainly time to put the emphasis on a female. But have read the Wolf 8 book, female number 9 is a major character. In the 21 book, his longtime mate 42 is a very major character. The female was a force of nature. She was a whirlwind, a hurricane of female empowerment. Now, he does appear in the 302 book, and there was a period where she and 302 knew each other. Have you come to that part yet?
No, I don't believe so. I'm roughly around page 100. Yeah, I'm not there yet.
Okay, good. You'll come to that. So for people that might not know too much about 06, in some ways you could start talking about her as she was the equivalent of a Disney princess. She was drop dead gorgeous. All the male wolves tried to court her. And for the most part, she couldn't care less. She just turned them down right and left. And if they were a little too persistent, a little bit too touchy-feeling, boy, she had no problem in just beating them halfway to death. Witnessed some of those beatings. And I was certainly glad that I was not on the receiving end of them, that she just would terrorize males. And they were so afraid of her, they wouldn't even try to fight back. They would just take it because, of course, they knew they were wrong. And there was this one big, tough-looking male wolf I remember I watched, and I think he was the dumbest wolf that we've ever had because he just pushed her too far. And at that moment, she just turned around, and it was just devastating. And I thought of, there's a line from the band Heart. They have a song called "If Looks Could Kill," and the line is where the girlfriend is saying to the bad boyfriend, "If looks could kill, you'd be lying on the floor saying, 'Please, baby, please, don't hurt me no more.'" And if this poor guy said that to 06, she'd look at him and then run back and beat him up twice as bad. And then in wolf language, she would say, "Don't call me baby." That's what an empowered female she was. And in some ways, well, when 302 came into her life, it was a really fascinating thing because he was getting a little bit older, but he still had that charisma. And so they spent a little bit of time together, and he was with his nephews. And let's just say they were a little bit too, too enthusiastic when it came to courting 06, and that really displeased her. And 302, in his elder years, he would actually try to help out. So he would go over and he would chase off his nephews from 302, and she actually liked that. So there was the potential that they would become romantically involved. It never quite worked out, but he was kind of the equivalent of the Brad Pitt of Yellowstone, and she was kind of the equivalent of the Angelina Jolie. Maybe some of those things are dated. Maybe I should say he was the equivalent of John, the John of Yellowstone. That's a fair comparison, if you don't mind. Yeah. And then, of all things, when she was well into middle age, she just suddenly decided, okay, it's time. I'm going to settle down. I'm going to pick someone, and I'm going to start to have a family. But she picked two brothers, 754 and 755, and they were less than half her age. They were yearlings. So she was the equivalent of a woman that was maybe in her 30s, maybe early 40s. And they would be, high school sophomore or something like that. But the reason it worked so well, and it worked perfectly, she knew what she was doing, is that they were guys that knew they knew nothing. They were totally obedient to her for their entire lives. And that's why it worked so well. So I think maybe this is just human speculation. Older males that look so impressive to us from a human point of view, their personalities and their characters were already formed. With the younger guys, she could kind of mold them to what she needed. And part of the story in the book is to answer the question, did she pick the right guys? Because it looked like she hadn't due to their inexperience. And what I can tell you is, yeah, she picked the right guys. When the climax of the book comes and she and her pups were in danger of being murdered by a rival pack, and she, because of just recently having her own pups, she was too weak to be able to fight them off by herself. And she absolutely had to defend on those two guys. I tell you, they came through for her.
This might be too abstract a question, but I'll risk asking it as it just came to me. But so you mentioned, you'd started with these first three stories about males, and do you feel that as you were observing this female wolf in this focused way, that it conjures up different emotions in you, or that they emit a different essence, or are those experiences different for you in a way that you can communicate?
Oh, thanks for raising that. There's different ways that we can talk about this. I think I already mentioned that in the 21 book, there's a lot about alpha male 42. By the way, she was, I guess you could say 06's step grandmother. It's a little bit of a complicated story, but they were related. So there's quite a bit about 42 in there, quite a bit about Wolf 9 in the 8 book. But 06 had such an exciting life story, and there's so many lessons in it. And it's certainly an example of a life story of, and I like to use this term, an empowered female who knew what she wanted in life. And she was just this unstoppable force. There's a lot of stories in the book about how she had to protect her young pups from grizzly bears. And she was just unbelievably fierce in doing that, risking her life in the sense of sneaking up on this bear, biting it in the rear end and wanting the grizzly to chase it. And she would lead it away from her pups. So she was the very definition of fierceness. In fact, that word fierce is a theme in the book. Just so impressive. She was a master hunter. She could kill elk by herself. And she just didn't take any guff from any male in her life. So for my women friends, boy, she's just such a great role model. And in a sense, a role model for guys too, in the sense of we should just do what we're told when we're told what to do.
I mean, the amount of life lessons and references that you've made in this podcast are just it's amazing. I want to, I guess, what can people expect? Because though let's just say there are people that have read American Wolf, because I'm sure there are a number out there who are listening, and there are other people, and we spoke with Lori Lyman before, who was integral in helping make that book a possibility, but she obviously followed oh 06 too. What are some of the main things that we can expect from the Rick McIntyre view of oh 06 as opposed to if people have read American Wolf?
Well, I worked with Nate Blakesley, the writer of that book, and I felt he did a really good job. As you know, probably at least half of the book is on politics, politics of the hunt and management of bulls and things like that. And then the people involved in well, let's just say that the politics of it. And that's a proper thing to do. You may know that Nate, his background is actually a political reporter in Texas. So this was really a different field for him, but he of course, did a great job of it. And I don't think Nate would disagree with this at all. He, and I don't mean this in any negative way, but he came to Yellowstone after her death. So he got all of his information from myself and Lori Lyman. And we didn't mind helping him because we wanted her story to be told by someone like him that could emphasize the political aspects of it. So I touch upon those politics a bit, but my emphasis is on what her life was like on a day-to-day basis, what her evolution was like from a pup. Get to the issue that when she was young, she was bullied and beaten up by an older sister. So she had a lot of issues in her life. She had a lot of setbacks, a lot of disasters, a lot of complicated things that she had to deal with, as all wolves do. And she just was able to triumph over all those things. We didn't talk about specifically in more detail about her mate 755. And I do tell some stories of what he did on the day that I'll just say that she was lost, how he was loyal to her. And then what's very important about the story of 06 is her daughter, 926. She took over the family after the death of her. And boy, she was very much her mother's daughter. And she very much inherited her mother's spirit and character. So I tell part of the story of 926 in that book. I'll just give you a slight taste of that. So several years after the death of her mother, 926 was doing a great job of running the family. She had recruited a male to the family, 925, and he was killed by a rival pack. And a couple of days later, those very wolves, those male wolves that had killed her mate, showed up in 926's territory. She was very pregnant at that time, and so very limited with her mobility. But it looked like those four males now had come for her and her 6 pups that had been born a year earlier. When I say that she was pregnant, that specifically meant pregnant with 925's pups. It would look like they were coming now to get her. And I just cannot spoil the story of what happened, but it is in the 06 book. But I think I can say this, that it was like 06 was reborn in her daughter. She just took over the situation and with her feminine power, converted those males into serving her. So instead of them killing her, she essentially, in wolf terms, enslaved them to her service. So, she, like her mother, was an absolute force of nature, a hurricane. And I'm working on a 5th book too, and I could only tell part of 926's story. So in the 5th book, I continue the rest of her life, the rest of the story of 755 after the loss of 06, and then the story of the Junction Butte wolves. And the proposed title of that is Thinking Like a Wolf.
So because I know, so you have the 5th book that you're thinking of already, are you looking to do this this 3 male and then sort of 3 female run? Are you trying to get more female wolf oriented in the next few books? I know you spoke that you're going to talk about 755, but do you think you're going to head in that direction?
Well, in the 5th book, as I mentioned, I also write quite a bit about the Junction Butte wolves, and that's going to include 907, who we talked about in the first part of our interview. And I think she still has a lot to accomplish in her life. A lot of that book is about the female squabbling in the Junction Butte pack over who's going to be the alpha female. And I've come up with a lot of ideas how to understand the behavior of wolves in the wild, particularly how they deal with their life strategies, where not all wolves appear to have a life goal of being an alpha. Some are what I call mavericks. They just kind of live their life the way they want to. And I personally keep on learning every day more and more about wolf behavior as I watch the animals. And we keep on having these wolves live out their lives in front of us that have spectacular biographies. So I hope to keep on doing this. By the way, I just reached my, earlier this week, I think it was Monday, I had my 9,000th day in the field here in Yellowstone. So I'm shooting for at least 10,000 and maybe even get up to 15 or 20,000 wolves. I can survive that long. So there's more wolves to watch, more biographies to record, more wolves to tell their stories.
And if that's not an end to a podcast right there, that's that's the way to do it. Rick, just really quick, please, because I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the sales of your books, part of the proceeds do go to nonprofits or wolf recovery, something in that vein. So tell everybody where they can purchase any of the books, Rise of Wolf 8, Reign of 21, and The Redemption of Wolf 302, and the coming book, Alpha Female, Legacy of 06.
Well, I've been a very fortunate person in the course of my life. I've done well. And so I've been pretty much been able to donate the money from the books to good causes, Make-A-Wish, different charities, Red Cross. And then here in Yellowstone, our nonprofit organization is called Yellowstone Forever. And so a lot of funding for Park Service entities, including the Wolf Project, the wolf biologists that monitor the wolf, much of their money is actually from donation. So that's what I contribute to. And so I feel the wolves have done so much for me. As I say, I've been fortunate in my life. So my goal is to donate all the money from the books to good causes. And then if you ever hear of any podcasters that have some nonprofit organization where they're starving to death and they need some help, let me know, and maybe I can help you guys too.
That'd be great if we could partner with Rick McIntyre, Stephen. I think that's the goal.
It's the gold standard.
Yeah, you guys look kind of thin to me, so we'll buy some hamburgers for you. How's that?
I love it, Rick. This has been it's a pleasure to have you on again, and it's so great to have you here and to be 9,000 days in the field and watching these wolves and just sharing these stories is. It's something that needs to happen, and you're doing so well at it. And again, can't thank you for being here. Again, everyone, the newest book is The Redemption of Wolf 302, From Renegade to Yellowstone Alpha Male. It's out now, and I, again, highly recommend.
Very consistent
books.
Amazon reviews on that book.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's like one of the only 5-star things on Amazon.
That's right. You can pretty much.
One last thing. The next book, The Alpha Female Wolf, officially will be published in October. And if someone wants to go on Amazon, they do have the cover on there. And it's a great picture of 06. Amazon does a great job on selling books. And then I also like to give a plug for local bookstores, independent bookstores as well, because they do a great job in helping people find books that will change their lives. So local bookstores or Amazon.
Yes, absolutely. Go get the books, people. And then, if you're in the Yellowstone, look for Rick. He's always there. Rick McIntyre, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you and all that you do. So Steve and I will be with you all next time. How's to y'all. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Looking to support Wolf Connection or sponsor one of the wolves in our pack? Just go to wolfconnection.org, click on the Donate tab, and find out more information.